That was extra special. David and Jade, I envy you. What a precious privilege it is to have children. And what a precious privilege it is to have fellowship with Jesus. I am confident that there is a relationship with Jesus that I have not yet experienced. John writes the letter we call 1 John to Christians apparently who lived in maybe the Ephesus area of Asia Minor, encouraging them to participate in a fellowship with God that is almost beyond comprehension. John says, I experience it. I know Jesus in a very intimate and personal way that brings joy and peace and comfort to me. And he says, I really am writing this letter inviting you to experience this same fellowship with God, with Jesus. Now, last week we learned John mentioned 3 hindrances. He mentioned 3 things that stand between us and fellowship with Jesus. He was talking about walking in the light as Jesus is in the light. In other words, John says, if you want to have fellowship with him, you've got to become like him. 2 people can't fellowship together unless they have agreement, unless they agree on many, many things. You've got to have something in common if you're going to have fellowship together. And so John starts off by saying, if you really want to have fellowship with Jesus, then you've got to start thinking like he thinks, loving what he loves, and turning away from things that he hates. Then he says, there's another hindrance. That is if we think that we aren't sinners. If we think that we don't need anything, we are rich and increased with goods, and we really don't need Jesus. And we really don't need fellowship with God. I mean, God can go his way, and I'll go my way, and I'm all right. So John says, if we don't recognize our need and we don't desire fellowship with him, well, that's going to stop it. No fellowship. Third thing John mentioned is if we think we've never sinned, and that's hard to imagine that somebody would think they've never sinned. But as we discussed last week, I'm awfully afraid that even today, some people join the church for the wrong reasons. They don't join the church because they recognize that they are a sinner and they need a Savior. They join the church for social reasons, financial reasons. Now, to this morning, John is going to bring up a 4th thing that can prevent fellowship with God. And this is sort of a biggie. I got through the last 3 pretty well. I came through unscathed too bad. I'm sure most of you felt the same way. It wasn't too bad. We got through it pretty well last week. But now we come to one in 1 John chapter 2, starting with verse 15. A hindrance to fellowship. And let's just look at this together. Do not love the world, or the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life, is not of the Father, but is of the world. And the world is passing away, and the lust of it. But he who does the will of God abides forever. The first thing that jumps out at me from this text is that John is saying the world is dangerous to a Christian. The world is a hindrance to a person truly experiencing fellowship with God. Well, we need to discover what is in this world that is dangerous. I have what I think is a beautiful backyard. I love to sit on my back patio and just look at the trees that outline my backyard. I feel like I'm at the edge of a forest. And my crepe myrtles are blooming. Beautiful blooms on the crepe. 3-4 crepe myrtle trees in the back. I love to sit there. Is it dangerous to love the beautiful nature that God has given us? Is it dangerous to love the beautiful flowers on my crepe myrtles? Is it dangerous to admire the beautiful green trees that circle my yard and block out all other houses? All I can see is beautiful trees. And every evening, almost every evening, deer come out to play in my backyard. And I can sit on the patio and watch the deer, and especially the little fawns. They run and jump and play. I enjoy it so much. Is that dangerous? I don't think so. I don't think that's what John is talking about. That part of the world is beautiful, enjoyable. God gave it to us to enjoy. Once in a while I see a beautiful butterfly. I enjoy it. Beautiful birds. I've got blue birds and red birds. No, that's not the world John's talking about. That's not dangerous to a Christian. That actually enhances our Christianity. In the beauty of nature, I feel drawn closer to God. It contributes to fellowship. Well, could John be talking about this world of people? People from different cultures, people from different races, brought up in different circumstances, all kinds of people, different customs, different philosophies, different ways of life. Is John talking about that world of people being dangerous to us as Christians? I don't think so. Because the Bible tells us that Jesus loved that world. It says that God loved that world. God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. So that's not the world that John is talking about. So what world is it that John is talking about? Would you turn with me to the Gospel of John, chapter 15, verses 18 and 19. Maybe here we find a clue of the world that John is talking about. This is Jesus speaking now. If the world hates you, you know that it hated me before it hated you. If you were of the world would love its own. Yet because ye are not of the world, but I chose you out of the world, therefore the world hates you. Well, what is he talking about? The world hated Jesus, and Jesus says the world is going to hate you, especially if you choose to serve me. The world is not going to like that a bit. The world wants to hang on to you. It doesn't want you coming into fellowship with me. So what is that world? Well, obviously, it's the philosophy of the world, the attitudes of the world, the desires that are worldly. This world, as we know it today, is under the influence of Satan. And Satan's influence is designed to corrupt and destroy and to kill. The question came up in my Sabbath school class this morning is, when did Satan murder somebody? Jesus said Satan was a liar and a murderer. When did he murder somebody? Oh my. You know, today, if I hire a hitman to kill you, I'm just as guilty as the man who actually pulls the trigger. Satan has inspired every murder that's taken place on this earth. He's behind, the instigator of every murder that's ever happened in this earth, starting with Cain and Abel. So yes, he's a murderer, and his influence controls this world. It's a self-centered, selfish influence. Jesus gives us a hint into this philosophy of this world in John chapter 5 and verse 44. John 5 and verse 44. Again, Jesus says, "How can you believe who receive honor from one another and do not seek the honor that comes from the only God?" You see, the philosophy of this world is centered on this world. It begins with a cradle when you're born, ends with a casket when life ends. This world is centered on what happens between those two ends. It's centered on getting the most you can out of this life. This is it. That's the philosophy of the world. Get everything you can out of life while you're here. It's a worldly philosophy that's centered only on this life. And get what you can get, everything you can get, no matter how it affects anybody else around you. Looking out for number one. This attitude is all persuasive. Through the 60 years of my ministry, I've had the opportunity of counseling many marriages that were in trouble. I have yet to talk to a husband and wife who are having marital problems where selfishness wasn't the issue. Self-centeredness is the problem. That's the attitude of the world. We're all brought up into it. We've been cultivated into it. We've been trained into it to be self-centered. Get what you want. Almost every marriage is in trouble. That's in trouble is because the wife or the husband doesn't think the other person is giving them what they deserve. I'm not getting out of this marriage what I want, what I deserve. I think we can sort of boil the philosophy of this world down into this simple sentence. There is nothing better. There's nothing higher. There is nothing more precious than what this world can give you. It's money, it's pleasures, it's fame. So you best eat and drink and be merry, for there's nothing else. That's the philosophy of this world. And John says this corrupting philosophy is detrimental to fellowship with God. It's going to stop it. Fellowship with God can never happen as long as we are clinging even a little bit to the philosophy of the world. Love not the world. How do you stop loving the world? Where do you begin the battle? Not to love this world and not to be selfish and self-centered. It's sort of a lopsided battle. We can see the world. We can taste the world. We can touch the world. We can experience the world. Where's God? Can't see Him. Can't touch Him. Can't hear Him. And being the worldly creatures that we are, we tend to gravitate toward that which we can see, touch, taste, and feel. So it's a real challenge to know how to back off from the world and back away from it. And as Jesus said earlier, come out of it. How do you do that? So John mentions 3 specific areas in which we come in contact with the philosophy of the world. 3 of them. Let's look at 1 John 2 and verse 16 again. Notice that John mentions 3 areas of life that comes into contact with the world where we can begin to work on it. It says, for all that is in the world, lust of the flesh, lust of the eyes, and the pride of life. These things, John says, are not of the Father. They're the world, the philosophy of the world. So let's look at these 3 things just a minute. Well, first, before we look at those 2 things, the word lust, here, for lust of the flesh, lust of the eye. Lust is a Greek word that means a deep desire for something, a deep yearning for something, desiring it more than anything else. This is what I must have. That's lust. It's not just a preference, it's a burning desire, an overwhelming desire. It's interesting to think just a moment about desire, lust. If we have the capacity to really want something more than anything else in the world, then God must have given us that desire. God must have created us with that capacity to desire something passionately. Now, if God gave us that desire, did He intend for that desire to go unmet? No, not hardly. Did He plan for us to satisfy that desire by the passing things of this world? No. God evidently gave us this capacity to desire something passionately so that we'd desire Him, so that we'd want fellowship with Him more than anything else in this world. I believe that my desire to have a deeper, more fulfilling, satisfying relationship with God is God-given. I think God gave it to me, and He wants to fill that desire with Himself, with fellowship between me and my Creator. But Satan, bless his heart, does everything he can to detour that desire into something of this world that he influences, that bears his character, bears his stamp. Lust of the flesh. What does John mean by lust of the flesh? He's talking about focusing our desires on the things that we can see, touch, feel, and taste. Things like food, drink, leisure, sex, rest, enjoyment, comfort, anything that affects how the body feels. So the lust of the flesh would include anything and everything that has to do with how the body feels, what the body is experiencing. By the lust of the eyes, John seems to be thinking of those things that please us in our minds, that are satisfying to our inner lives, the things we see that gratify our minds. The lust of the eyes tend to push us into experiencing greed. We want to keep up with the Joneses. If they've got it, we've got to have it. If they do it, we need to do it. It's the lust of the eyes is seeing things that creates desire. Now, everything we see is not bad. Now, I love beautiful horses. I love to see beautiful horses. I love to see them prance. I like to see them trot. I just love beautiful, but I don't want one. You know, you know what I'm talking about. We see beautiful things that just because it's beautiful and we see it and we admire it doesn't necessarily mean we want it. But what John is talking about, when we see something that creates a desire and we begin to want that so badly that it begins to consume us. If our neighbor gets a brand new automobile, then we look at that beautiful car and we think, I've got to have one just as pretty or prettier if I can get it. It's the lust of the eye. I want what I see. And then coming down to the pride of life. That's easier, harder to fight. That's self-exaltation. Thinking that what you have and what you are is of your own doing. It's pride of possessions, pride of financial means, pride of property, pride of your accomplishments. I'm going to confess something to you this morning. They say confession is good for the soul. I am experiencing a problem with this pride business. Because I have to admit that I enjoy seeing doctors sit upright and stare at me when I tell them that I do 350 push-ups a day. I do. I get a kick out of it. pride of accomplishment, pride of possessions is a biggie for most of us. We want people to envy us. I told David this morning in class that I envy his arms. I would like to have big, strong, muscular arms like he's got. Looks like he could pick up a couple 100-pound dumbbell and just go with it. Yeah. Pride is something we all have to worry about. And you know, I've been praying, and I haven't got an answer yet, really. Lord, how can I give you the glory for the body you've given me and for the strength that you've given me? How can I give you the glory instead of taking it for myself? Because I know that God is the one who gives me the ability. God is the one who gives me strength. God is the one who gives me my health. It's not just the exercise I do. I think exercise helps, but exercise by itself is not it. It's God's blessing. And God should get the glory, not me. I don't guess any human being is free from the pride of life. We all like to be praised. We all crave attention. We want to be admired. Is there anyone who doesn't? I've never met the person. John is saying this desire for attention and praise is hindering fellowship with God. It prevents it. The more we allow the world to attract our attention, the more God fades into the distance. Okay? They're mutually exclusive. If our focus is on things that we can see, taste, touch, smell, then our focus is not on fellowship with God. It's one or the other. Let's go back to words of Jesus again in Matthew chapter 6 and verse 24. Matthew 6 and verse 24. Here Jesus says, "No one can serve two masters. For either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he'll be loyal to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon or the world." Jesus is not saying no man should serve. He's saying no man can serve. It's impossible. It's one or the other. In this world, in this life, there are two great forces constantly making their appeal to us. Both of them offer to fulfill us, to satisfy us, to make life good for us. But one is a lie, the other is the truth. We have to decide which is the lie, which is the truth. There could be one more reason that we need to factor into this choice, and that is, let's see, it's 1 John 2:17. Let's look at 1 John 2:17. John reminds us that this world Everything in this world, our houses, our cars, our furniture, our property, our fame, our reputation, our bank account, everything in this world is going to burn. It's going to burn up. It's going to pass away. As the wise man said in the book of Ecclesiastes, it's all vanity. You work yourself to death to accumulate things, and when you die, it goes to somebody else. It's gone. When you die, the memory of you is forgotten. Everything you've accomplished in how many years you live is going to end. It's going to be gone. Pass away. And he says, I guess it was Martin Luther that said, I've held many things in my hands, and they're all gone now. But everything that I've placed in God's hands, I still have. So as we think of it, that this world is passing away, everything in it is going to be gone. One day, way in the distant future, I can visualize Jesus standing with all of the faithful of the ages who've chosen to serve him, looking at this beautiful new creation, this beautiful new world that he's going to create. And they're thinking about what a thrill it was that God has made everything new. And I just sort of tried to imagine myself standing there with Jesus, looking at this beautiful new creation and thinking, I was a part of that. I was a part of it. I helped Jesus make all things new because I chose to serve him. There is a glorious fellowship awaiting us in heaven. A fellowship that we may never really enjoy here to its fullest, but someday it's going to be complete. We can enjoy being in the presence of our Creator, of our Savior, forever. Brothers and sisters, we must not let that slip from our fingers.